driving that through that executive committee of all the secretaries, or the state secretaries of other different unions, talking about how we're going to put pressure on the Labor Party to change their IR policy. Now, we did a fair bit of work with that. You know, I'm not sticking my hand up saying I did all of that, but certainly I was part of that process. Now, Labor have adopted that as to take that to the next, taking that to the next election.
So this is a plan relying on the change of government?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Now, putting that aside, if they don't get elected, it is going to be a totally different conversation. I think we're going to be back into the trenches, holding on to what we've got. This government will, you know, like we've seen every time, first year out, here's the cuts, boys and girls, here's the reduction of services, here's the selling of bus services, you know, here's this, we love all these volunteer organisations, they're fantastic. So it's kind of two different speeds there. Labor get in, and look, I'm not saying that's a fait accompli either. You know, we certainly don't trust most politicians, but you know, I suppose they're the better of the bad bunch, if that makes sense.
I mean, I don't have much more to add to what Leighton has there, because he's obviously working in that space, but one of the things that definitely needs to happen more and is building relationships with all parties, so that then, particularly in the Senate, so that you can bring some pressure to bear if the Senate is hung again, or has the balance of power in the Senate. So, you know, I think the relationships with Shoebridge and the Greens and people like that are really, really valuable, because they can bring some pressure to bear. But, you know, I think traditionally the Labor Party has been the supporter of the union movement, and I think even holding them to account a little bit more on that front is really, really important. I think one of the big challenges in modern politics is everyone's racing into the middle and they're forgetting their roots. The right, you know, the Conservative Party is getting dragged further to the right by the alternative right, but we need, as a union movement, need to remind the Labor Party of where their roots are. And I think, you know, those sorts of political connections and relationships are really, really important in the union.
Rich?
Yeah, no, I'm going to let that voice, mate. So, Leighton, I don't know you overly well. Dobbo, you and I have worked together for a long time, we've known each other for a long time. And so this is probably more a question for you. You've had a pretty impressive career with what you've done and what you've achieved in the job.
Can't hear you, mate. No,
Just step up. Rich, step
What?
in front.
Sorry guys. So this is a question more at Dobbo, who I know and we've been friends for a long time. I guess something I've heard from the guys and I've just wanted to give you a chance to address is that when you're a union secretary, you're going to have to lock horns with management at times, and I know a lot of these guys are your friends. How do you feel about that?
I think that's a good question, and probably just for people that don't know, as I said, I mentioned that I was the Wellbeing Coordinator for 7 years, and in that job I actually took over an organisation that was a very reactive organisation, and I spent 7 years changing the attitudes of people that work in fire and rescue to be more proactive about mental health. So much so that the policies that I wrote for fire rescue were adopted by Beyond Blue and the Mental Health Commission to roll out as guidelines for emergency service workers across the whole of Australia. So, you know, strategically and change management and things like that, I've got some really significant runs on the board over the last 7 years, and I don't necessarily see the role as the Secretary is significantly different to that. It's identifying how we're going to move forward, thinking strategically about that and engaging the right people. To address your question about relationships, there's a double-edged sword to that. Knowing people can be used to your advantage. Knowing how they think, what's important to them, can be used to my advantage, and those relationships can be used to my advantage. One of the things that, as the Wellbeing Coordinator, that I did a lot was butt heads with management, because my whole role was to look after the welfare of fireys, and there were times where I, you know, went head-to-head with zone or area management about what a firey's rights were at work, whether they can return to work, and things like that. So I think it's really it's something we need to acknowledge, that I do know those people, but I'm not beholden to them at all. And I've argued with them strongly in the past, and I also know how to influence them. So I think that's an important relationship to have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, look, and I suppose I apologise for maybe not giving you a quick bio on me. Drury, I've got 4 kids. Joined the job in 1999, spent most of my time at Parramatta. One of those blokes that's got Bryno slippers, and really enjoyed it. Worked in Western Sydney most of my career, did a bit of time at Hornsby. Station delegate at Parramatta, sub-branch executive committee member, sub-branch secretary, junior vice president. Did about 6 months in the office as an industrial officer, and obviously now the current state secretary. Oh look, you know, we all know people in management. You know, I don't know that many. I wouldn't call a lot of them my friends, but I know them. We all bump into them. We've either worked with them, and you know, we all have meetings with different people. One of the jobs of the state secretary is, you know, what I think is absolutely key as a union leader is about holding management to account. Simple as that. Now, if you go and ask, you know, fire rescue management at the moment, do you like Leighton Drury? I'll tell you, nearly every single one will say no. They don't like me. They don't like me. I'm a little bit blunt. I'm maybe not as polished. But they also don't like the fact that I tell them the truth. And I tell them that we're workers and that we're organised and we're not going to cop their crap. Simple as that. Now we can go and do change management stuff and all that sort of management gobbledygook, but in the end it's not about that. It's about holding them to account and getting the best result that we can for this membership.
Yeah, leading on from that, I think everyone realises the strength of this union has been the size of its membership and its degree of militancy that's had over the years, and that the government and the department have always feared that the withdrawal of Labor from us is something that they find very ugly and they can't handle. And I think everyone here would have been part of that in 2012 with the workers' comp dispute, where, you know, it was pretty well unprecedented the sort of action we had to take. Now, listening to things about how you're going to take on management, things like that, having management relationships is one thing, but beating a government, and we've seen over the years different things we've gone cap in hand to the government for, they've just said flatly no. I would like to know, and are you committed, Mark, because I do know Leighton, and I know the previous secretary, are you committed to driving if needed, because we don't know what's going to happen in the future, and there are some ugly things that happen from time to time, like the workers' comp, that we had to react quickly, and in the background there was a political push, and we had to use that strike that day to get that 11-hour decision that's protected us like no other. No other union got that. We got that on our own. Are you going to commit to that sort of... what is your policy on general strike, withdrawal of Labor? I don't know what your position was on the day, whether you went on strike yourself or were off duty or whatever. But I want to know, before I move ahead and have any vote, that the greatest single piece of leverage that this union has is its strength and unity together. Everyone went that day, except for maybe, I think, one. And essentially, are you okay with that? Is that what you're going to drive? And I want to know that commitment is there before I form any sort of opinion.
No, I think that's a good question. I think it's something you definitely need to know. I was there on that day. I think I was standing beside Jim for a while, and it was a tougher call for me because I walked out of the head office that day. You know, so it wasn't, you know, everyone knew where I was going, you know, but I thought long and hard about it, because I think withdrawing Labor and the risks associated with that need to be thought long and hard about it. So I didn't just go, hey, I'm doing it because everyone else is doing it. I said I'm doing it because I thought the issue was important, and the time frame that was thrust upon us, you know, nearly forced our hand on that. You know, there wasn't an opportunity for negotiation and discussion because the legislation got thrown upon us at the last hour. So I think, you know, in desperate times, desperate measures, and I thought, you know, and I think that was the right decision at the time. We got some good outcomes from it, and I think the upper house drew some strength from having, you know, a collection of firefighters, or 300 plus firefighters standing at the front of Parliament House at the time. I didn't really support hosing the roof down at the time, but I don't know about that. We haven't got the bill. I don't think Jim's got the bill for that yet. But I agree. I think we have to have that as a big tool in our arsenal. We have to be careful about how we use it. I'm watching with great interest of how the rail unions are going to act over the next week or so, and what they can achieve before they have to go on strike, or if they do have to go on strike, because that'll give us a really good indication not only of how the government reacts, but also of the ramifications industrially, because things have changed a little bit on the industrial context since when we went out on strike, and the fines are a lot greater. So the risk is even greater, but it's something that I'm definitely not adverse to. It's something that I think is what makes us strong as a union, along with our membership. And that's why I want to really increase our engagement, so everyone feels that they're part of the membership.
Look, you know my view on it. I voted on that day, that evening, funnily enough. It was a very, very long day for State Committee. 2012 was the election. It wasn't long after we'd just all been elected. There was a pretty new State Committee. And it was one of those big moments where you go, wow, okay, we're actually about to, withdraw our labour, which we hadn't done for a certain amount of years. It's one of my most proudest days, and it's not about actually withdrawing our labour. And I was thinking of this only the other day. I remember the morning of the strike. They'd gone to the office, they'd voted, right, we're pulling everybody out. And I remember starting getting phone calls, because I was running the Parramatta sub-branch at that time, the Sydney Central West sub-branch, going, this guy's not going out. This guy's not going out. And I remember ringing people saying, mate, what's going on? Oh, I'm a little bit worried about, the community, this, that, and the other. I said, mate, well, we're a union. If you scab, you're going to be basically taking workers' comp off your mates, off yourself, off future firings. Yep, no worries, we're going. One guy didn't want to go. He was in this side of the station. I remember ringing the inspector going, look, I don't know what's going on. He goes, no, leave it with me. Now this inspector, we'd had a few run-ins over the time, but I found out later, he drove to that station and said, right, we're all going out on strike, get in the car. And he says, just looking at him going, what? He says, we're going out on strike. That was one of those moments where I went, there you go. Our members from top to bottom, sticking together, doing what they need to do. So, look, I suppose my view on withdrawing our labour. Like I said, I don't think we should be doing that lightly, but certainly when you've got to hit hard, that's where we go.
Just probably more a question for you, Leighton. Well, there's a few of us here and we're talking about wages. I'm curious to know who sets the salary for the president, and since they're looking after our money, are the people in the union office subject to random alcohol and drug testing?
Yeah, look, funnily enough, they are, because 16 out of the 17 are firefighters. So yes, they probably are subject to. Thanks for coming, guys. They are subject to it, just like you are. Sorry, what was the first part of the question? Who sets the wages? Everyone here. Everyone here sets the wages for the president, the secretary. They only set the increases. They don't set the decreases. So I've changed my wage in the last year. So I've reduced the super down from 17% down to 9%, and I've changed my long service leave. So it's a less accrual, just to be in line with the office staff rather than firefighters who get a better dig. But so if you would have remembered 2 years ago, the organising allowance actually got picked up for the country sub-branch and the retained sub-branch, and all you guys voted on that at an annual general meeting. So the only one that can play with wages for the elected official is the membership. We can't approve any payments to ourselves outside of the policy, and any increases or anything new about that comes to the general meeting.
Including Chris Reed's wage?
So he's a staff member, and there's a staff policy and state committee sets.
So the state committee sets his wage?
Sets the staff wage.
So we don't set the wage? Well, that's what you just said.
No, so there's the state committee, which Chris Reed's not a part of, and then there's the staff.
So who sets Chris's wage?
State committee.
So you guys decide how much he earns.
Yeah, so we're the employer. So at the moment, I'm actually Chris's boss. Because so they work for me.
So you get paid out of our money, but the state committee determines how much he gets. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh. Fair enough.
So like any other staff, there's a staffing policy. I stuck it up on the website just recently. So if you jump onto the forum, the secretary's pay is there, the staff policy is there, and the levels of pay that they get, as well as the state committee allowances are there as well.
So, but the members don't get a say in it. Is that what you're saying?
Not in the staffing policy, no.
Okay. That's time.
Oh, just a question. Would you like to?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
It's
yeah.
my money.
Yeah. We can run that policy if that's what you want.
It's not branch B.
Just away
Oh.
online voting.
Yep.
What's your stance on that? And if it hasn't been, if it is that you're for it, why hasn't it been implemented yet? And then what's your stance on it? What should be happening in the future?
Yes, a good question. Look, I don't think it's a simple answer. When I talk to people about online voting, what I hear is they want to be able to vote, they want to engage. So you've got big general meetings where people have to drive to set meetings, and then I think that at the other end you've got this online voting. But I think really what we're after is we just want to be engaged, and we can't all turn up to these big meetings. So to me, I think, and over the last year we've been looking at this, the rule changes, the branches, how they work, how that delegate system works. So I think there's this play in the middle, which I think does two things. If you move to station-based voting, which we can't really do now in the metro, the rules. If you move to a station-based voting system, I think that will alleviate a lot of the issues that we've got. So if you can't travel all the way to Sydney, when you live at Blacktown, you can just go to Blacktown. One of the issues that I suppose that we've got with online voting is about how do you have the debate and how do we see ourselves as a union, I suppose more importantly. Now one of the things I like about this, I'm sure me and Mark kind of feel a bit uncomfortable, having the 50 questions pointed at us, and Mark probably feels the same here. This is awesome. There's 50 people here that we don't, we very rarely do this, as we very rarely do it, as a service.
30 seconds.
But we don't, this the only time that we all get to collectively is like as a union. And I think that's important. You get to have a look at Mark, you get to have a look at me, you get to have a look at the bloke asking the questions. Now, we lose that in the online world. Can we fix it? I think we can. So that, yeah, station-based voting, and then does that happen online? Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose my concern is that if I can't turn up to vote, I then lose my right to vote. I'm paying the same money as everyone else here.
Good.
Why am I not entitled to vote? That is